Welcome everybody. This is making use of our robot overlords, automating your DevOps workflows. So if you're interested in DevOps, or you're interested in robots, or you're just interested in cool demos, you picked the right talk to go to. In the way of introductions, my name is Brian Thompson. I'm the Director of Web Engineering at a company called MINDGRUB. We are a digital agency up in the Baltimore area, and you can tweet at me if you have any questions. That'll be throughout the presentation. A little bit about MINDGRUB, since they did pay for my travel and stuff down here. We're a digital agency. We do lots of Drupal. We also do WordPress and marketing and digital design and user experience. We play ping pong, we have happy hours, and we do company outings. We are looking to hire in the Florida area. So for all of you who raised your hands and said you were from Florida, hi. So you can see this is what happens when I ask the marketing department at MINDGRUB to MINDGRUBify my presentation. They put in a slide with lots of pictures. So this is from our ski trip that we just recently took. People went skiing in panda suits. Here's the company as of a few years ago in the space that we took over. We play a lot of ping pong. When the power goes out, we move the ping pong tables towards the windows so that we can still see and play. We have a virtual reality room that we call the holodeck, which is hooked up with HTC Vives and Oculus Rifts, where you can just go in and play games. We also do virtual reality development as well, which is super exciting, and I'd be happy to talk to folks after the talk about. We take paintball trips, so you can see this is 20-25 people who got to shoot at their coworkers. We have our own food truck. We go to baseball games, and that's the end of the sales pitch for MINDGRUB. So when we talk about robots and DevOps and automating your workflow, the best thing to do is look back about 150, 75 years ago to the starts of the revolution and the Industrial Revolution in America, where we had very assembly-lined workflows. Somebody's building a car, and this picture here is building wheels to a car, and you can see everybody's in line doing their piece. Building a car requires hundreds of parts, thousands of parts, hundreds of thousands of parts. Each person does the same thing over and over and over again. Your job might be to put a screw in somewhere or to attach a wheel. And so if we've done that, and we've done it for the past 100 years, why bother to automate? If it's working then, why should we continue now? And the answer is there's lots of complexity. Building a car is very complex. Managing websites these days is also very complex. You have your Drupal, you have your database, you have the hosting, maybe you have multiple servers. Do you have to run any updates because the changes you're making have changed a data structure somewhere? There's lots of minute detail to it. Do you need to revert features if you're working on a Drupal site? Or if you're in Drupal 8, do you need to import the configuration from your new changes that you've made? It's very tedious. As somebody who works in an agency who has lots of projects going on simultaneously, we might be deploying multiple times per day across our projects. And so to continuously do the same thing over and over and over again gets really boring. And when it gets boring, it's prone to mistakes. And so what people have realized is that human beings aren't really good at robot work. That's why we have robots. So let's make the robots actually do the work for us so that we can play more ping pong and paintball and go on ski trips and stuff like that. And so I always like to start with this picture here. This picture is actually from one of MINDGRUB's clients, which manufactures pipes and hose fittings. If you've taken a shower in the last week, or if you've put gas in your car in the last week, or if you've ridden in a car that's used gas, or somehow otherwise transported a fluid to you in the past week, you've used this company's products and just not realized it. And it's very interesting when you go and we talk to them and we do website work for them, we build them mobile apps, because they've taken their entire manufacturing process of building these parts and replaced it with robots. Why? Because their workers were doing the same thing over and over and over again. It's prone to mistakes, it's not efficient. So now they have all these robot arms that swing around left and right and build these parts and shave them down to exactly the right size. It's really, really cool. Similarly, we saw the picture of the assembly line at the beginning where we were making cars. This, I believe, is a picture of one of Tesla's manufacturing plants, where you can see there are lots of robots throughout the entire shop floor there, building different pieces of their cars that they make. So, again, what are some of the benefits to automation? It frees up developer time. I can have a smaller development staff because we don't have to spend time continuously delivering. We can let the robots do that. It gives us time to actually do training and research and development and try new things because we don't have that time bogged down on other mundane, repetitive tasks. Machines aren't prone to human error. If I tell the machine to do something and I program it correctly and bug-free, it will do that every time I tell it to. And it also lets us improve project visibility through dependable notifications. I'll talk in a little bit about this concept called ChatOps, which is a term I only just heard about a few weeks ago, even though I've apparently been using it for years. Now I know the buzzword for it, so we'll talk about that in just a bit. So when we talk about automation and what we do, what do we automate exactly? We have all these nails that we could automate, but which of them, how do we decide which ones we're automating? And so right now, this is sort of the list of the things that we automate in our day-to-day workflow. Deploying code, reverting features in Drupal, importing configuration on deployment for Drupal 8, updating the database, running drush updb. If we're taking the live database and we're pulling it back in a testing environment to make sure that our changes are valid with the live data set, are we sanitizing that data properly to make sure that we're removing any user's personal information? Make sure we're not sending emails to users from a staging environment so that they see environments they're not supposed to. Are we following the proper PHP syntax? Are we committing any errors against the PHP code styles, the Drupal coding styles? All of that gets checked automatically as we work. Automated testing. MINDGRUB employs both a team of manual QA testers who are really, really good, but again, it's robot work, right? It's tedious doing the same testing over and over again. We automate a good portion of that, let the robots do it, and let the manual testing handle the really, really odd edge cases, like what happens when you smash your face into your keyboard when your text is, or your cursor is in a password field. I say that, I've seen it happen. Building sites and even deploying them via Docker containers, which is a new hot thing. There's been some Docker talks over the past 2 days. Hopefully you've gotten to catch them. Using front-end build scripts. Has anybody heard of Sass before? So for those of you who haven't heard of Sass, Sass is a way of compiling your CSS to make your processes more efficient. It lets you use things like variables to define certain color codes. But browsers don't understand Sass. That needs to be compiled down to regular CSS. And so if you do that by hand, one, you're doing a lot of tasks over and over again. Two, it introduces a ton of merge conflicts when you're using version control, which is a huge pain to deal with. So by automating that process and letting the robots do it, it handles all of that on its own. And finally, team messaging. When you work in a team of more than one, it's important to be on the same page with everybody with what's going on. When we're doing deployments, we generally need to coordinate between multiple parties. The engineering team needs to make sure they have all the code and changes ready to go. The operations teams needs to make sure they're ready to deploy. Our QA team needs to make sure they're ready to test what gets deployed. And our project management team is trying to coordinate with our clients to make sure that we're not deploying in the middle of one of their marketing campaigns or an email blast they're about to send out. So there's lots of moving parts when we do these deployments, and by automating these workflows, it takes the burden off of the individuals to go around from office to office, desk to desk, person to person, asking, hey, are we good to go? Are we good to go? And instead lets the robots sort of handle that through our messaging system. So what sort of tools can we use to hit all these nails? I have lots of different hammers here. Which one is the right one for the job? And that really depends on what you're trying to do. Tools like Jenkins, which is open source, is super powerful. We've used Jenkins for a while. I will tell you the advantages of Jenkins are it's super flexible. The disadvantages of Jenkins are it's super flexible and it's not very user-friendly. They were doing some work. They just put a new theme out for Jenkins to change the UI to make it better. But overall, we're actually moving away from Jenkins and moving to other tools. And there are a couple different reasons for that. The UI is one of them. Other tools like Circle CI or Travis or GitLab offer you the same sort of continuous integration functionality automation that Jenkins does. One of the key differences between them, though, is Jenkins, you do all of your configuration via the web interface. That's great for people who don't necessarily know how to code or how to open a text file. But with Circle, Travis, and GitLab, you actually define the steps you want to take in code, and they become part of your version-controlled code repository, which means you're always going to know what's running and when changes are made to that. If I add a step to my automation workflow, I don't have to guess when that step was added, whereas in Jenkins I would, because I don't know when that step was added through the UI. By using a tool like Circle CI or Travis or GitLab, I've committed that change to my code repository, and I can very easily see when it happened. There are also hosting providers are providing platform hooks. So tools like QUICKSILVER, which is Pantheon's answer, or Cloud Hooks, which is Acquia's answer, to be able to run certain tasks when other actions happen. I believe Platform SH has an equivalent as well. I just don't know what they are off the top of my head.
So with Travis, that's what I've been using.
Mm-hmm.
I know what you listed before for automation and whatnot. That wouldn't cover all of those points, would it, Travis?
It would not. So
you would use multiple.
Frequently, we use multiple tools to get the job done. Right now, we use a lot of Jenkins. We're transitioning away from that and shifting a lot to Circle CI.
Okay.
One of the disadvantages of Circle CI, and I'll tell you, MINDGRUB is transitioning away from Circle CI now that we've transitioned to it, is Circle CI has a pricing model, which works great if you're a small team, if you've just got one site. If you have multiple sites going on at the same time, Circle CI gets really pricey to be able to run multiple things concurrently. And so we're actually in the process of switching to GitLab and GitLab's CI system. GitLab gives you free repositories, both public and private, for as many users as you want. It also gives you a free continuous integration system that will run whatever you want. It just gives you Docker containers that run on DigitalOcean. There's no cost. Sometimes there are every now and then scalability issues if they have lots of people running things concurrently, but their runners auto-scale. So if there's a backlog, they'll spin up more of them. They handle all that cost themselves. There's no cost to you, the end user. Absolutely fantastic. They make their money through their enterprise sales of GitLab, and they've written blog posts about how that's more than enough money for them to be able to sustain their business and then some for the next however many years, so they have no plans of changing their pricing model.
That's pretty awesome.
It's absolutely fantastic. And if you're dealing with security requirements or you can't use publicly hosted, GitLab also has a free self-hosted version as well, which works spectacularly. But as you mentioned, sometimes, and in fact most of the time, one tool is not always able to do everything. We frequently combine something from this top set of 4 with something from the hosting provider hooks section to be able to work in tandem. And so right now we're using a lot of Circle CI, so I'll talk about that for just a few minutes. Like I said, Circle CI, the configuration is committed to your Git repository using a circle.yaml file. And so this is an example of a circle.yaml file that we had on a project, where you can see here, I define what my server name is, what PHP version I'm using, in this case 5.16.14. If I wanted to run my own web server in Circle, I could define that here. This is the start of that. Excuse me. And so I specify my host file, what entries should be in there. Then I get into this test section. This test section has a pre and an override section within it. The pre-section happens before your tests are run. The override section overrides the default test Circle CI would run. So on PHP projects, Circle CI is going to try and run PHP unit. If you're working with Drupal 7 sites, you don't have PHP unit most likely. Maybe you do. Or maybe you even want to do more than that. In this case, we're using a tool called PHP CS. So in this pre-step, what we do is we take the Drupal coding standards and we set that as the coding standards we want applied to our project. And then in the override step, what we're saying is for all of the files that end with an inc, PHP, or module extension, we want to run them through the Drupal coding standards and report any errors to us. This will catch little idiosyncrasies like maybe not having a blank line at the end of the file or comments that are over 80 characters, and promotes consistency across the entire code base for our project. And we only run this against our custom code. We don't run this against Drupal core or contributed modules itself. If you run this against Drupal contributed modules, what you might find is that not all of them are compliant. And so we try and fix them where we can, but sometimes it becomes an uphill battle to be able to fix all your contributed modules just to fit the Drupal coding standards. And so until the Drupal Association rolls out automated testing of that sort for all the projects on Drupal.org, which I'm told is coming, we right now only check against our custom modules and custom themes that we build. So you can see here, this is actually a test run from that Circle CI file. In this case, it failed. I can see that really easily because I have two big red failure indications here, so I don't even have to be up close to read what those failures are. If I'm looking over somebody's screen or I just glance at a notification board, I can see that my Circle CI tests have failed. And I can expand that to see what the exact problems are. So you can see here it had two issues. Warning number one was to avoid / escaping in translatable strings when possible. That's on line 13 of this tpl.php file. As well as I missed a comma on the last line of a multi-line array. And that's on line 15 of this file. PHP Code Sniffer actually contains tools to fix these automatically for you, some of them. So you'll notice this one here has an X, and it tells you PHP CDF can fix that for you automatically if you want, where it will run through your code and try and fix it and add the commas, add the extra blank lines as needed. Some things it can't fix, such as the backslashes. Some things it can. And so as we do this and we have our code test running and we have our automation running, the way the Drupal community is moving right now is to build entire sites with automation. And when I say build entire sites with automation, there's this concept of a bare repository. And by bare, what I mean is it only has your custom modules and themes in it. Everything else is included via Composer in a composer.json file. Drupal has this Composer facade, which they make all of the modules and themes on Drupal.org available through. And Composer is built into Drupal as of Drupal 8.1 fully. So you can see here if I want the token module in my site, all I do is add that to the require section of my composer.json file. And instead of having to include the token module in my code repository, instead I just have Composer download it every time I do a deployment. This makes the repos a lot lighter. It makes them a lot easier to download when you're on conference bandwidth or when you're traveling, or really anywhere where you don't have a full repository or a full internet connection, because they're a lot simpler to get started with. Composer will also do some caching, so my computer caches some of the most commonly used modules we use across the site. So even though I would technically still have to download these to be able to use them if I'm spinning up a new site, my computer already has versions of them based on the version specified cached locally to save me that internet. And this replaces the drush make functionality. Has anybody used drush make before? A couple of folks? Excellent. So drush make was a way of sort of defining your project with what modules you needed in a text-based format. This is part of Drupal's move to get off the island and use the same processes that the rest of the PHP community is trying to shift to. If you don't have Drupal 8.1, maybe you're running Drupal 7 or Drupal 8.0, Drupal Composer is your friend to get things rolling that way. And so you can see here, this is actually a composer.json file, or the top half of the composer.json file, for one of our Drupal 8 projects. You can see at the very top, I define that I want to use packages.drupal.org/8 as a composer repository. What that does will allow me to pull modules from Drupal.org the same way as if I were downloading them or doing drush DL to pull them down via drush. I then require various other libraries, Composer installers, Drupal scaffolding, Composer patches. All those are super interesting. I would encourage you to look at all of them when you have the chance to be able to see how you can patch modules in a composer-based workflow if needed. We also require various dev tools, in this case Hat and some other testing frameworks like PHP Unit. And all of this leads into a system called ChatOps. If we're building our sites automatically with Composer, and we're automating our tests and keeping everybody in the loop, we get to talking about ChatOps, which is one of the ways MINDGRUB has optimized this workflow. Like I said, deployments are really, really complex. As simple as they seem, anytime you're talking about working on a site that's more than just a blog, your deployments can get complicated. And so we actually have a video demo here of the deployment process we now use at MINDGRUB. It integrates with our chat system called Slack and runs some automated tests, and I'll talk you through it as we watch it here. So you can see right now I have a Drupal site. This is the user page. And what we want to do, this site is related to Star Wars. And so we're going to adjust the view of default users for admins to include everybody's favorite robots. So when you register, you specify whatever your favorite Star Wars robot is. Maybe it's BB-8, maybe it's R2-D2. And we want to make that information available to our admins right on the table view without having to go into each one. So you can see we've got a simple view, we've added the field to it, and we're now dragging it up higher in the list of tables. And we'll hit apply. And you can see when we scroll down to the preview here, we have a bunch of different robots now listed for our users that we've auto-generated for this project. Similarly, if I go back to the people page, I can see BB-8, BV-2000, C-3PO, and lots of other robots that I didn't know actually existed in the Star Wars universe. The next step after I've made this change as a developer is to use what's called features to save them. Features is a process of saving your configuration to code for Drupal 7 sites. In this case, we use a process called Features Builder. If you've never worked with Features Builder before, I would encourage you to go out and look at Features Builder. It's a way of automatically saving your features without having to guess what particular feature to put a particular setting in. Super useful, could be a talk all on its own.
So is that a module, or?
Features Builder is a module, and it just builds your features for you.
Is it 7.0 or is it 7?
It's 7.
So you need it, do you need it for 8, or they don't have a version for 8 yet?
I don't believe they have a version for 8 because 8 uses configuration management, so slightly separate. Good questions. You can see here now I'm in my Pantheon dashboard where this site is hosted, and I'm looking at all my file changes where I can make my code commit. Where if I were working locally, I could use git command line or source tree or git tower or any of my other local Git clients. I'll add my connection or git commit message in there. Add the develop module as well as update features to include favorite Star Wars robot on admin screen for users. Seems like a good commit message. I'll hit commit. Those changes will be committed to my code repository. And now I'll switch over to Slack. The first thing you will notice when you see Slack there is that I've got lots of channels down the left-hand side. An insane number of channels, actually. But the way MINDGRUB works is it has different channels for every project that's going on. Each project has its own channel. These are all the various projects we have going on at one time. This one I'm in right now is particular for Star Wars and the Star Wars site we're working on. You can see we're talking about different robots. And what I'm going to do, that doesn't show up really well at all, is ping my project manager on this project that says, it looks like we're ready to deploy. We've got our changes made. Is everything ready on your side? What we're looking for is the project manager to confirm that everything's good from a client standpoint, they're not in the middle of an important demo, or they're not getting ready to start a marketing campaign. This would also extend to our quality assurance team to make sure they're on board as well. At this point, from a development standpoint, I'm sort of in a waiting game, waiting now for them to respond back and indicate things are good. Maybe this is my opportunity to get a coffee or find some food somewhere. But now they say, all set, here's the key. And they're even nice enough to give me a key emoji. And so what we've done is integrated our deployment process with Slack using this /Pantheon command. Since most of our sites are hosted on Pantheon, I can run /Pantheon help to be able to see all the various commands. And each project has a default site associated with it. So in Slack, this particular Slack channel is associated with my Star Wars site in Pantheon. So I don't need to tell Slack which site I'm talking about. All I need to do is tell this channel that I want to deploy from dev to test or test to live or whatever the environment may be. On the right-hand side here, you see I've opened up a command prompt window. And what that's going to do is actually show me some output from the process as it's going on. I don't normally do that, but for demo purposes, it's helpful to see. So you can see I kicked off the deployment here. If I switch over to the Pantheon dashboard, it's deploying. And if I look at my workflow logs, I can see that a deploy code to the test environment got kicked off. What's happening now is not only is Pantheon deploying the site, but I also have Jenkins running some automated tests for me after that happens. I'm reverting features. I'm updating the database using drush updb. And all of that's going to get reported back here in Slack in just a second. Depending on how many tests you have to run, it can take some time. But you can see now I have this big message here that says, "My deployed, here's the deployment message, and everything has now finished." I've also got my deployment message from Pantheon directly, indicating that not only has my Slack command finished, but Pantheon itself has finished. And now I have Jenkins chiming in that says everything is green, all of my tests have passed. This way, project managers aren't coming to me or coming to developers on the team saying, "Is it done yet? Is it done yet? What's the status?" It's really easy to look in Slack to see exactly what's going on, and it keeps everybody in the loop. Similarly, I'll go to the test site here and I'll sign in just to prove that all my changes work. And so I sign in as my admin. I click on the people page, and I now have my favorite Star Wars robot column right where I left it on dev, now on test with all my changes right there. Never actually had to go into test, never had to run any more than one simple Pantheon or Slack command to be able to kick that off. Very easy, very low work, very easy to keep everyone in the loop. So that's all well and cool. This is fairly similar to what we've been doing for a while now. But there is one more thing, just for you guys here at Florida Drupalcamp. I mentioned earlier this concept of hosting provider hooks. And what I mean by that is both Pantheon and Acquia and Platform SH, I believe as well, gives you ways to run certain tasks on completion of events in their platform. If you think back to the Slack commands that were just run, that big Slack message that appeared that had the deployment message and the rocket ship in, that actually comes from Pantheon itself based on some configurations we defined. And so we've used that. It's a platform called QUICKSILVER. And there are links here to their various examples. The advantages of this, it's guaranteed tasks to run. We use it for lots of different things, reverting features, logging to New Relic that we've done a deployment so that we can see if performance has improved, worsened, or stayed the same. Like I mentioned before, sanitizing the database when you sync from live back to dev, or even other small things like updating Drupal variables. If you're running something like MailChimp or Google Analytics, do you want your dev and your test sites reporting that information to your same live environments, or do you want it reporting somewhere else? We actually have a Google Analytics code that we use across all of our dev and test sites that are separate from what we use on live environments, which would be our customers' Google Analytics code, so that we don't pollute their analytics data with our own information.
So you have like a sacrificial property that everything just logs to?
Exactly.
That environment? That's cool.
Yep.
That's a good idea.
And so previously we would forget to do that all the time when we would sync the database back because it's one little itty bitty step. Yeah. Now anytime I sync the database out of live to anywhere else, our platform hooks run, it happens automatically. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to worry about a client calling me because maybe the information that connected their ERP system was stored in Drupal variables, and there's a live and a test version of their ERP information, and somebody was working locally and just placed an order that went to the live ERP processing server.
That's a common problem.
Yes, it's a common problem. We are working rapidly to solve it. Now, the disadvantage of all of these cloud hooks, and the thing we really, as much as we like them, the thing that we sort of didn't like about them, or the challenge that we faced with them, was that we need to set them up on every project. Unlike Drupal modules or Drupal themes, which I can install via Composer and always have the latest version and keep my repo very slim, with these platform hooks, you had to just include them in the code repository and either copy-paste from a central repository, or if you have a Drupal starting point or a WordPress starting point, start from there with the same version every time. And so what we've done is created a system specifically for Pantheon, because that's what we use for hosting at MINDGRUB, called QUICKSILVER Composer Scripts. And what this does is allows you to make your QUICKSILVER automation scripts that sanitize the database, that change those Google Analytics IDs, available via Composer instead of having to be included with the code repository every time. We wrote our own Composer plugin to facilitate this. What you can see here is that there's now a Composer plugin called QS Composer Installer, which allows you to specify which folder these platform hooks go in so that they're in the right space based on whatever platform provider user you're using is looking for them in. So I require that. Similarly, I require now whatever particular script it is I want to run. In this case, I want to revert all features for Drupal 7. And that just goes in my require section of my composer.json, and that's all you need to do. If you need a specialized location or you want to put them somewhere else, it works just like other Drupal modules where you can specify a custom directory in your extras section. But by default, this line here where you just include the QUICKSILVER script itself should be all you need. We're trying to get QUICKSILVER script writers to require the Composer installer plugin automatically. If they do, then you don't even need to add that to your require section. If they don't, or you want to be safe, you might include it just to be safe. And so you can see here, if I do that and I run Composer install, I've now dropped these in my web private scripts QUICKSILVER directory, which is exactly where Pantheon is looking for them without any extra work. What exists so far? We have scripts for reverting features in Drupal 7. We have scripts for database sanitization, which includes changing your Google Analytics IDs. It also includes changing user 1's password when you sync back from live to non-live environments so that you can run a more secure password for your super admin in the live environment and change it to one that's known by your other developers in your non-live environments. We've also had Greg Anderson wrote one to which he calls QUICKSILVER Pushback, which allows you to work on Pantheon in what they call multi-dev environments, which are similar to dev, and then open pull requests against repositories in GitHub by syncing your code back the other way out of Pantheon into GitHub or GitLab or Bitbucket or whatever your code repository is. We're working to get more of them. The QUICKSILVER examples repository that I linked earlier has about 20 some examples in. We're working to get them composerized. They are all available on Packagist as of today, so you can start using this as you get out of here. And if you're looking for further examples, Pantheon's example drops 8 composer repository includes usage of QUICKSILVER Pushback to show you exactly how it can be used. How are we doing on time? 10 minutes to go, right where we should be. At this point, I'll open the floor for questions.
Well, can you get a snapshot of that last slide, one before that? Thanks.
No problem. Do you have a question?
I was going to say, I'm assuming your presentation will be available. However, we're going to make things available after the.
So as soon as we get finished here, I will tweet out a link to a blog post explaining all of what I just released.
Okay.
And I will also be uploading the slide deck and tweeting it out. It'll go on the Florida Drupalcamp site on my session there, and it will go on my blog as well.
Okay, great.
And if you have any questions, please tweet at me, email me. You can tweet at my company, and they'll track me down if I'm not answering and tell me to start paying attention to Twitter more than I am. More than happy to help out with all of you trying to get this pushed forward. I think this is the way of the future. I think it's really exciting. I think it will revolutionize the way everybody builds projects across Drupal and even WordPress and other PHP-based projects they build. And I'm more than happy to sort of help people push forward with that.
A quick question for you, and this may or may not be relevant. Maybe it might be a Genius Bar question, but you guys have figured out how to work with Composer and Pantheon. So your Composer stuff, it pulls everything in the local environment, and then the whole thing gets pushed to Pantheon, or is Pantheon pulling when you just push up your lightweight?
So we, all of our projects live in GitLab.
Okay.
That's where we do all of our primary hosting, and then we have GitLab automation that takes anytime somebody pushes to GitLab, runs a set of automated tests on it, and if those automated tests will then push to the dev environment of the corresponding Pantheon site.
And it pushes everything at that point.
It pushes everything. Now, Pantheon does have support for Composer as of a few months ago. We wrote a plugin for their command line interface called Terminus, which is the Terminus Composer plugin. So you can actually take and put your composer.json file on the dev environment of Pantheon, switch it to SFTP mode instead of Git mode, run Terminus Composer install, and it will install all of your dependencies for you and let you commit them. But with the way Pantheon works, if you're deploying to test or deploying to live, all of the whatever you deploy needs to be in your Git repository.
Okay.
So
you got it. So you can actually do kind of the pull into the dev environment through Composer, and then the full repo then goes to test and live.
exactly,
Okay.
exactly. Alrighty, well, thank you so much for coming, everybody. Thank you for coming out early Sunday morning. Enjoy the rest of Florida Drupalcamp. The code sprints are happening, and they need lots of help, so please go help them if you have the time. I will be around. I'll hang out in the Genius Bar, hang out in the code sprints area for a bit if you want to talk further, or if you just want to talk about robots in general. More than happy to stay and chat for a while.